Patricia McPherson Grassroots Coalition, and I have a bit of a concern. I frankly, perhaps I'm wrong, but I thought that the Coastal Commission was an independent entity that would provide its own comments from its own science-based people that were reviewing data. To have this meeting today and
Patricia,
discuss.
this is part of your presentation, because you know
Sure.
what we're dealing with. This is a presentation? Okay, go ahead. I thought you had one up here.
It's a question with regard to the time, because we are given such a short amount of time,
Yes.
and yet they are given all of the time, and they are not from the Coastal Commission.
This, by the way,
So I'm just
is
asking.
an absolutely discretionary decision on our parts. You had asked, and we had asked, to have some informational hearing. We just had it. Now I have 40 people I'm going to try to accommodate, and it's 4:30. So 15 minutes, let's get going.
Just asking.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to go through the history of the Coastal Commission's influence upon Ballona wetlands restoration, starting from the outcome in 1990 of that settlement agreement, starting from the land use plan lawsuit between the Coastal Commission and Friends of Ballona that ended up with a settlement agreement. That settlement agreement was included the Army Corps of Engineers, it included Friends of Ballona, it included CD 11, the Council District 11, and the State Lands Commission. As you can see here, this is a letter from the Department of Justice that has Peter Douglas affirming the fact that he is going to fully support the attainment of a full tidal salt marsh at Ballona wetlands. And it says at the top here, I'm sorry, I don't have my pointer. The Ballona Wetlands Committee is made up of Playa Vista, the State Lands Commission, Friends of Ballona, and CD 11. That was a result of the settlement agreement, that they would have oversight of the whole Ballona area, including the freshwater marsh system in its total. Thank you, Rex. Here we have the, if it worked, am I going the wrong way? No. At the very top there, 5-91-463 is the application with the Coastal Commission, and you have on the left the Department of Army permit 9426EV. Those two are married underneath this settlement agreement. The description in that highlighted yellow portion at the top says for the Coastal Commission application that the Army Corps permit description is within the CDP. So they are tied as one. And Peter Douglas at the time was under pressure to waive the standard requirements for preliminary approvals from local, state, and federal agencies prior to the Commission's acceptance of a coastal permit on this for this permit application. So there was no science being done at the time. While all of this was being negotiated, it was being divvied up politically. And as you can see, the committee, who were the groups I just said, which was Playa Vista, State Lands Commission, Friends of Ballona, and CD 11, came up with the Ballona restoration of the salt marsh. Everything was pointed toward the settlement agreement of Ballona wetlands goals and objectives, and the restoration would either be full tidal or a mid-tidal system. None of this was based on any science that was available at that time. This was all politically divvied up, and it was essentially hearsay. It also says in the yellow box down there, the estuarine is a coastal embayment. And that is essentially what we're talking about now. And why I'm trying to show this to you is to show you that this set the stage for the DEIR that we have now. I'm showing you why I believe we have nothing in the DEIR. There is no hydrology analysis. In roughly 2006, they got more money to do a hydraulics analysis, which was a quote-unquote unexpected hydraulics analysis, which was to see the waters coming down the channel. But for a wetland restoration, this does not have a hydrology study for it. And up here for the permit applications, all of the language relates to the fulfillment of the settlement agreement for 5-91463, but the settlement agreement in the lawsuit with the Friends and the others. And who again manages the freshwater wetland system? Again, it's the Ballona Committee and the Ballona Foundation, which is established by the committee to be those same players. Here we have up in the upper right, you see the land at the time, the land use plan, and all of the land on south of Ballona Channel there was already deemed to be wetland. The yellow portion is what is now the freshwater marsh, and above that was to be developed, as were the other areas. The California Coastal Commission relied on this language to approve CDP 591463, which was the freshwater marsh system. Freshwater wetlands habitat would offer greater productivity. The system would increase species diversity at Ballona, provide 52 acres of scarce coastal riparian and freshwater marsh habitat to declining species. Well, at the time, these are developers that wanted to develop on top of a piece of land that was a wetland. Playa Vista knew it needed to remove the groundwater. It knew it needed to create a flood control system, and knew of Ballona's freshwater ponding in Centinela Creek and Ballona. Here's a picture from just 1952. That is not a flood. That is freshwater ponding across all of Ballona. All the roadways are elevated there. Here is a picture just 10 years after the settlement agreement. All of these are freshwater ponding areas that Playa Vista, in Area D, knew they had to get rid of, and are still getting rid of, and pumping and diverting the water and throwing it into the sanitary sewer, as I told you last time. Here is what Ballona looked like approximately 10 years after the settlement. Also, you can see Playa Vista's little hello center there at the intersection between Lincoln and Jefferson there, but you can see that all of this land has freshwater ponding all across it, including the area that's north of Jefferson where those illegal drains were that Playa Vista told you could not pond. The Department of Fish and Game told you it could not pond. And so therefore the drains were not doing anything. And yet we see it's ponding there, and as I showed you before, and thank you for the capping of the drains, it is now ponding again. This is all fresh water. Now here we go back again to the relationship with the proposed freshwater marsh system and the LUP. It all comes back again to the Army Corps and the Commission, all following the settlement agreement. And the settlement agreement is calling everything a saltwater marsh. It's hearsay language at this point. 1999, the settlement agreement, all lands west of Lincoln, south of Jefferson. The goals and objectives by the Wetlands Committee. Carrying out the provisions of a settlement agreement for reviewing applications and implementing the settlement agreement. That settlement agreement, by the way, was updated again in 2006. What's going on with that settlement agreement? Because the Coastal Commission verified the fact that they were no longer going to be a part of that settlement agreement, but they still reaffirmed their original agreement, which meant their original agreement had to do with the saltwater marsh theories. Meanwhile, this thing is updated in 2006 with the city and Playa Vista and Friends of Ballona. And how does that affect anything now? And how does that affect, and then here again, I've just got all the green. You can see all of this for the CDP as well as the Army Corps is all about saltwater, 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 and all of this language. There in the middle, you see the original committee that came up with their idea of what to do with Ballona. Those two red arrows point the areas that, as you can see in the picture on the right, actually were dug out from the channel and allowed saltwater intrusion into Ballona. At no time was a 408 done to determine what harm would happen to Ballona as a result of this saltwater intrusion. There was no discussion or inclusion of the hydrology studies that were performed by Poland, who is the grandfather of all hydrology in the LA basin, that knows that this area is a predominantly freshwater area. There's no Department of Water Resources mapping that was available, House Document 389, which helped create the Marina. None of that information was used. All of this was available during the time of the negotiations. The current DEI predetermines Ballona's restoration as a salt marsh. It contains no hydrology analysis. Had we had an hydrology analysis, we would have seen the Coastal Act violations via those illegal drains. We would have seen the Playa Vista off-site pumping and throwaway into the sanitary sewer. We would see all of this flow. And we would see the fresh water that's being sent from the freshwater marsh into the channel. And we would understand those impacts, and it would be a part of what we were able to understand and try to protect Ballona and restore the fresh water to it. Playa Vista, that's the image up there is about 15 to 20 feet that they dewater, according to the water board, from the Playa Vista site, which is all thrown away. Why are they allowed to throw this groundwater away? Oops, wrong one. Again, we get back to the insertion of the square drain. While Andrew has said that there is a permit, it is a rather vague permit, but this was on the Phase 2 portion of CDP 591463 that did come in two parts, similar to the capping and the removal. That permit did too, and this was in the area of the second phase, and there is no city approval for that portion. Also, the release here, if we had had a DEIR that covered these issues, there was a Prop 65 case that came as a result of the sale of the land from SoCal Gas. SoCal Gas essentially lost in that, and because it was found that they were contaminating the groundwater. That groundwater is currently classified as drinking water under Prop 65 and is classified by the Water Board as potential drinking water. If this land is dug out to allow saltwater intrusion, that takes away that classification and takes away SoCal Gas's liabilities for all the contamination that they've provided to that land. And further, it causes further corrosion to all of the systems they have in that land. All of these issues were available before the DEIR was released, and they are not in there, they are not addressed. So I'm asking, can you lift some of these issues that happened before? Because as we see, here's DWR in 61, and even Playa Vista used it in the EIR for Playa Vista, that these are freshwater aquifers. Here's part of the Poland report. It shows that Ballona Wetlands is a unique and now very rare seasonal freshwater wetland. So the early stuff was based on false premise. The coastal freshwater drinking wells were in Playa Vista, which are written on here, and the Playa del Rey, which was then known as Palisades del Rey. The classification of groundwater, as I said, remains drinking water for Prop 65. Here's the House Document 389 from 1954. Again, it cites multiple irrigation wells in the Ballona area, and it warns of further saltwater contamination and dredging to remove that clay layer that's between it and the 50-foot gravel aquifer to try and protect these aquifers. Here again is freshwater marsh ponding, and today we do have groundwater protection laws that exist that should be used to protect this fresh groundwater. Ballona hasn't been given a chance. There is no alternative in the DEIR for a freshwater alternative. Why is that? Here's the Prop 65 lawsuit. Supporting the big dig of Ballona to bring in full or muted will change the designation of the groundwater from drinking water status. And the soil gas investigation, testing, monitor, and remediation will not be required, according to the red number 7 up there, as part of their settlement agreement. And it will take away their liability of contaminating what is classified as drinking water, which is precious groundwater. Here in 2006, this is the settlement agreement that was reaffirmed. The Coastal Commission said we reaffirm our 1994 stipulation to the 1990 agreement. But how does this all affect all of this? Because the Ballona Conservancy was never a part of this. The Coastal Commission, I have nothing that shows that they affirmed the Ballona Conservancy, which, according to, I get into the Ballona Conservancy here, is Fish and Game a part of this, I've asked, and they have said no, except that I've told you Brody has said, in communication, I have the emails with Mr. Huffman, where Mr. Huffman tells Brody that he can vote. Here we have Senior Mr. Berg from the department also just recently saying he's an active participant in the Ballona Wetlands Conservancy Board. And yet, to the left, you see the Ballona Wetlands Conservancy is cited by Fish and Game for a streambed violation for the roadway that was illegally built down there, plus the harm to the wetlands down in the other lower right picture there. So again, what is going on here? What are these relationships? And here again, we have the 1990 settlement agreement update. Pictures of this. Oh, on the right, it shows the Conservancy. The Conservancy is designed there to provide the costs for the oversight, or for taking care of the freshwater marsh. Well, we're totally fine with them taking care of the costs. But why do they have the direct oversight of this marsh? Why isn't an independent person doing this? Why are they allowing all this freshwater diversion from underneath Playa Vista to be thrown away? Why are they allowing all of the other freshwater marsh water being thrown away? And as far as SCWRP is concerned, here is the contract that came up. And what it says is they are to do a study to have the outcome be the preferred restoration alternative, which is an estuarine outcome. So they were hired, according to this contract, to come out with one outcome, a saltwater-influenced wetland, and everything else was to be subservient to that. And indeed, there is no freshwater alternative in the DEIR. There is no hydrology analysis to even determine these things. Who's actually controlling this? I think ultimately the original agreements and the drive that was going on to divvy up Ballona back in 1990 played the largest role, and Playa Vista remains playing the largest role here.
Thank you. Okay, the next group is Ruth. There you go. Ruth Landsford. You have 9 slips. Or it's Ruth.
I'm giving it back this pointer.
Okay, come on now. Life is getting complicated. I know, yeah. So you're going to have 9 minutes.
I have what?
9.
Oh, I thought it was 10.
All right, you have 10.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right, slip one by you.
My name is Ruth Landsford. 40 years ago, I founded Friends of Ballona Wetlands with a mission to save and restore the last wetland in Los Angeles. It's a shame that we have to be here today. It's a shame that so much chaos and confusion has been sown by factions with no integrity. Organizations like the Ballona Institute, formerly Wetlands Action Network, both of which have had their nonprofit status revoked, have created and promoted all this propaganda, ranging from misinformation to malicious lies to idiotic absurdities, like the Friends are racist because we want to get rid of African plants. That's the latest. Over the years, the Friends have lived up to their mission. We have completed these 3 projects at Ballona. Every one of these projects was opposed by Wetlands Action Network, the Ballona Institute, or Marcia, Hanscom, and Roy Vanderhook under a different banner. First, the dune restoration in the 90s. When we began, the dunes were gutted with ice plant. With thousands of volunteers, we ripped it all out, replacing it with natives like dune lupin. Native plants that had been slumbering beneath the surface for years also burst forth. It was a proud and thrilling experience for the Friends. But there were problems. Roy Vanderhook showed up looming over the participants, accusing them of doing everything wrong, which was especially disconcerting for children. Part of the dune restoration was planting dune buckwheat to entice the return of the El Segundo blue butterfly, an endangered species. It worked. Every year during butterfly mating season, we have a celebration, public invited. I guess it's not very polite, but we do get to watch. Belding Savannah sparrow lives in the pickleweed adjacent to the tide gates in West Area B. It's an endangered subspecies because there's not much pickleweed left in urban LA. Until 2009, their population of 10 to 13 pairs never increased because of their shrunken habitat. The influx of salt water from the creek was shut off by flap gates installed by the Corps of Engineers back in the 30s, when no one thought wetlands had any values. Flood control was the only thing on the government's mind. Those gates were killing Ballona, and they nearly succeeded. Supported by then Congresswoman Jane Harmon and City Councilwoman Ruth Galanter, the Friends persuaded the new owners of Playa Vista to install regulated tide gates, allowing in limited salt water. The enhanced and now stable tidal flushing has increased the Belding's population for the first time from 13 pairs in 2009 to over 50 in 2015. The usual suspects claimed it was a trick so that Playa Vista could apply herbicides and that it was being done incorrectly and would kill the Beldings. As usual, untrue, not true. The southwest corner of Lincoln and Jefferson was plowed fields for many years. It had become what one biologist called a biological junkyard. But the Friends knew it was wetland soil. Our settlement agreement with the landowner required the creation of a 26-acre freshwater marsh there, plus a 25-acre riparian corridor adjacent to the LMU bluffs, connecting to the marsh under Lincoln Boulevard. Consultants were hired, and Here, there they are. And the marsh was designed. But then Wetlands Action Network halted the project. They sued. Then came demonstrations, hunger strikes, actors changing themselves to Playa Vista's door, all protesting the killing of mythical endangered species by villainous bulldozers and claiming the marsh would be polluted. It took a year, but we prevailed, and those bulldozers went to work. Now the 51-acre ecosystem is flourishing. 250 bird species have been observed using the system since its creation, and an impressive number are wetland obligate species. For humans, the marsh is a tranquil oasis away from traffic and the buildings of urban LA. We've also brought out over 100,000 visitors and thousands of volunteers. We have education programs. Children from underserved neighborhoods visit Ballona. One even exclaimed breathlessly, "This is the best day of my life." And that was wonderful to hear. But most of this, except for the freshwater marsh, takes place in around 30 acres, the westernmost portion of Area B that still functions minimally as wetland. The rest, deprived of water or buried under 20 feet of fill from the Marina, has been overrun by non-native plants and at times non-native predators such as the red fox, which almost wiped out all the wildlife at Ballona. After the state bought Ballona, the Ballona Institute suddenly and inexplicably reversed their previous position, which was, to quote Van der Hoek, quote, "bring in more deep water to Ballona by removing any and all gates on Ballona Creek so full tidal flow will bring in bigger fish," unquote. In the blink of an eye, their mantra became no bulldozers. Restoration would kill the beldings and the butterfly, and other endangered species would be crushed by the villainous bulldozers. President Obama once called such people, quote, "professional activists who profit from conflict," unquote. The Friends of founding members, along with other science-based environmental groups of the Wetlands Restoration Principles Coalition, formed to protect Southern California wetlands. Other members are Heal the Bay, the Trust for Public Land, LA Waterkeeper, and Surfrider Foundation South Bay Chapter. We agreed on 9 principles that must be met for a successful restoration. 18 organizations have signed on to those principles. When the Ballona EIR was issued, Wetlands Restoration Principles' first task was to study the documents, debate, and then agree on comprehensive comments from our team of experts, which you have. In other conflicts, reputable scientists disagree. Was Ballona historically salt or fresh water? I referred you to a paper and 2 articles supporting salt. Other well-qualified scientists say fresh. We do not endorse either side. But this is almost beside the point. Most of those 2,000 acres, whether fresh or salt, are gone forever. We have 600 acres left, surrounded by development and roads, and we must work within these formidable constraints. Our EIR comments and those of the Wetlands Restoration Principles Coalition illustrate how we can restore Ballona as we did the freshwater marsh within those constraints. We are all devoted to one cause, Ballona restoration. Why did the state spend the money to buy Ballona? Not just to keep a pleasant playground for humans. No, they bought Ballona to save and restore a wetland. For over 40 years, we've been wrangling, filing lawsuits, propagandizing, fighting, while Ballona's deterioration continues. The invasion is relentless. This year's heavy rains brought a deluge of black mustard and garland chrysanthemums, demonstrating how little wetland is left. We enjoy the temporary golden glory, heedless of the message of doom for Ballona. Restoration will bring to Ballona a new water-dominated ecosystem, full of wildlife drawn to its resting, nesting, and feeding place. Fish will once again seek out the nursery of its quiet streams. Wildlife that only lives because of this unique place between land and sea and others like it will return. People will not be excluded. Well-regulated trail systems will invite the public to a newly restored Ballona, encouraging future stewards and teaching visitors about the part it plays in the living drama of our world. We owe this place. We who almost destroyed it must repay that debt. 40 years is too long. It's time for the games, the wrangling, the conflicts, the bureaucratic delays to end. It's time to bring back Ballona. Thank you.
Marcia Hanscom.
You ready? Are you ready? Yes?
Would you get started, please?
Yes. Is this it here? Okay. Honorable Commissioners, Marcia Hanscom with the Ballona Institute. We are a part of the Protect Playa Now Coalition. I also chair the Sierra Club Ballona Wetlands Restoration Committee, and the Sierra Club endorses these views. Ballona Wetlands. Do gas and water mix in an ecological reserve? Uh-oh. Okay. The Ballona Wetlands is a state ecological reserve, as you've heard. The mineral rights, however, below belong to Southern California Gas. And you can see there are new drilling rigs that go up regularly. Are they all permitted? That's a big question. Oh, sorry. Also immediately adjacent to highly flammable eucalyptus grove, monarch butterfly roost, site for great horned owl and red-tailed hawk nests. And again, these questions are these permitted? We don't know, and we would like to get to the bottom of it because we think that the SoCal gas is a big part of this project you are looking at. There are chemicals, gas rigs, they're too close to wildlife, and really this storage field needs to be shut down. There are new unpermitted infrastructure, we believe, here. They've added lights, bridges. There are nocturnal species here. And you can see there are infrastructure parts of SoCal gas throughout the site, including extraction wells and this oil well here that is covered by non-native species that for some reason Friends of Ballona Wetlands and others don't want to remove because they're hiding a lot of this infrastructure. There was an unplanned gas release on January 6, 2013, and it was only one of many, but you can see this picture here. There also are Proposition 65 warnings throughout the ecological reserve that says that obviously their chemicals are known to cause cancer. And some of you may have heard of the Aliso Canyon Porter Ranch blowout. This one's in the coastal zone, and you have jurisdiction. This is an older gas site than the one that blew in Aliso Canyon. And just down the road here, via Marina and Tahiti Way, on January 11th, Dogger had to issue an emergency order because there was a blowout here. And it's still not plugged to the state standards. You can see here a worker escaping the gas blowout. And there's video actually on YouTube if you want to take a look at it. But the bottom line is gas is not a renewable resource. And supposedly we're trying to change that in this area. And this project, this fake restoration project you are looking at, is actually going to help SoCal Gas stay longer. We want to close down this site. These are just some of the wells that are just to the north of the site. There are hundreds of wells in and around the ecological reserve. And some of those are proposed to be dug up in this plan, just like this one that was dug up for a hotel driveway and blew. Do we want to really look at that kind of risk? And according to the Army Corps permit issues that were submitted to the Army Corps, SoCal Gas is one of the 4 people on the management team, SEMPRA, the parent company of SoCal Gas. Now, you can see here that these are white-tailed kites. White-tailed kites actually have their own law in California before the Endangered Species Act that is supposed to protect them. And we would like to suggest that another reason for no bulldozing besides the wildlife safety and the public safety is we should not have this big, deep excavation where there might be another blowout. Now, I'd like to also have you look at some of the things that were in your own Coastal Commission staff report comments. They said on page 38.8, the EIR states that routine surface monitoring of SoCalGas wells found storage gas were reaching the surface through leaks and along the well casings in wells that biogenic gas was detected. And there are important questions your own staff asked. Where are the 3 leaking wells located? Where are the 4 reabandoned wells located? These questions have not yet been answered. We hope they'll be answered in the final EIR, but they were important questions that your staff asked, and I'm really disappointed that they haven't been talking about this to you, because the gas field is underneath the Ballona wetlands. There are gas wells throughout the ecological reserve, and it's just not being paid attention to as it needs to be. They also say once the wetland is, quote, restored, it will become harder and result in more impacts to address poorly abandoned or leaking wells. That's why we think the emphasis should really be at the entire ecological reserve is protect not just the Belding savanna sparrow that you did hear about. There are 8 endangered species that rely on this site. There are dozens of species on the special concern list for the state of California. If this were a private applicant, your staff would tell them to go back and start over, that this would never be approved. You don't take when they talk about restoration, they're talking about bulldozing, excavating the entire site. We've seen the documents given to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they say, clear and grub everywhere. Clear and grub. So here's the bottom line. SoCalGas will add new fossil fuel infrastructure as part of this project. SOMAS, the engineering firm, has already received $3 million for just putting engineering drawings together for the Army Corps of Engineers. That was our Proposition 12 money we worked for that was supposed to acquire more land or do genuine restoration, not do engineering drawings. So who else benefits? SoCal Edison and Chevron. These are both customers of the storage field beneath the wetlands. They get lower prices for their gas to fuel their operations. Again, I just want to emphasize, this were proposed by a private entity. In the 30 years I've been coming to Coastal Commission meetings, I can tell you that I know the staff would tell the applicant that such a project would not be permitted in the coastal zone. So we would like you to tell California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Lands Commission, who owns 60 acres, which they've been pretty much not part of the discussion the last few years, that they need to work on regulating the mineral and surface rights of SoCalGas and work toward shutting down this climate change impacting facility. And then we say, yes, no bulldozing, no gas storage, protect the 8 endangered species and dozens of species on the California list of species of special concern. This El Segundo blue butterfly on the left, that wasn't there when the land was purchased. When we worked with Governor Gray Davis to acquire this land, much more land than the Friends and Playa Vista wanted and had agreed in their settlement, we wanted more land. And at that time, that butterfly was not present. It is now, not because of bulldozers, because people did some hand restoration. Same with the Leesbell's vireo that I showed you earlier. That endangered species has come back since the land was acquired. No bulldozers. It's really a result of federal actions, recovery team of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and allowing that bird species to do better down at Camp Pendleton so it could come up north in recovery into this area. So what does the East Bells Vireo need? Willows. That question has never, ever been asked in any of these meetings about this project. We know it needs willows, willow thickets, freshwater willow thickets. Why aren't those kinds of questions being asked? What do these species need? That's never been asked. And that's what needs to be asked. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask all of you who have, or who still want to speak, to get in line. And I will look for your card. When you state your name, you'll each get 1 minute, and I suggest that you just try to come up with a way to say what it is you want. Okay? So just get in line in any form, I don't care. And then I'll just find your ticket.
Yes, and I do have a presentation.
No. 1 minute?
It'll only take a minute.
Okay, you can have that.
Okay. Could I get layout? And while they're waiting to bring this up, I just want to say the theme of my presentation was going to be the echo chamber that exists at Ballona. I can't begin to say how disappointed I am in the way this meeting was formatted. Clearly, the design was to cement a narrative in your heads before the first word in rebuttal. I think that's disappointing. I'm going to take my limited time to talk about just one slide. And this is, I blocked the name out, but it's the woman who spoke to you from the Bay Foundation, Karina Johnson, restoration ecologist for the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, a state agency, is among those who have known about these drains for several years while studying the existing ecology of the wetlands in preparation for developing a restoration plan. She says the PVC drain has been out there as long as we've been monitoring. We have photos from it from back in 2008. To my understanding, from comments from the consultants who assisted in the building of the freshwater marsh, the Playa Vista consultants, I'll wait till you guys are done. Okay. These are permitted overflow pipes that don't drain the wetland in the way that the media is projecting. They are only in the area between Culver and Jefferson, and they're there to prevent the flooding of the Jefferson and the surrounding areas in the storm events. And I'm done, and I would just say again, this was incredibly disappointing.
I'm sorry you're
Yeah.
disappointed. Who's next?
Okay, my name is Cindy Hardin. I am the Director of Outdoor Education for the Los Angeles Audubon Society, which I've heard a lot of social justice, environmental justice being mentioned today. We provide field trips for children from underserved schools, about 2,500 a year. So through my job, I have this unique opportunity to be at Ballona quite a bit. Obviously, I had more to say, but in my time limit, I will say that this rainy year, and I've distributed an article to all of you about that, served to remind us all of the freshwater that was and is present at the wetlands right now. We didn't even, the rain this year was 18 inches, 15 is the average, so it wasn't even like a huge year. I advocate for more freshwater being directed into the wetlands as part of an alternative offered in the revised EIR. There are freshwater species present right now, including chorus frogs that are still singing, and this is a habitat that we need to enhance rather than flood with salt water. Thank you.
And I think that was a very good way to present. You said you'd rather have fresh water than salt water. Makes it very clear. Go ahead. Next point.
Thank you. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Molly Basler. I'm a climate reality leader, environmentalist activist, and I too support the freshwater rather than the saltwater, leaving Ballona as it is, but exiting the gas fields, the gas storage. You know, as you know, the UN just came out with a new report in regard to biodiversity, IPCC about climate change, that we only have 10 to 12 years. It's really important that we keep sacred spaces, and if we start to bulldoze all of that, carbon is released because there's carbon in the soil. And it's also killing habitat. Why not keep it as is and get rid of the storage space? So I support keeping Ballona as it is, not bulldozing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Edith Reed. I manage the Ballona freshwater wetland system. I've done so for the past 13 years. I don't fall on either side of the freshwater or saltwater debate. I just want a diverse native ecosystem back and functioning. And I should correct, earlier the treated groundwater that's done by Playa Vista is not thrown away. It's sent down a riparian corridor that had been created and beginning in 2010 provided habitat for the least bells vireo.
Thank you. Name?
I'm Rex Frankel. I have slides.
Got 1 minute.
Basically, I support a freshwater alternative at the Ballona Wetlands. The slide presentation, which if we can get it up here, we expected more time. Basically, the proponents of bulldozing the Ballona Wetlands have stated specifically that the US EPA and their TMDL for sediment removal at the Ballona Wetlands said that the Ballona Wetlands were a salt marsh. 70% of the Ballona Wetlands were historically a salt marsh. If you go to the next slide, you'll see, continue next slide. And that's where they say vegetated wetland is 70% in the middle there. But if you go to the next page and read the text, it says historically 70% of the Ballona Wetlands was composed of vegetated marsh, which was salt marsh, brackish, fresh, and seasonal wetlands. It was not just salt marsh. And that's why we're advocating a balanced ecosystem that has all the natural habitats in it, not just exclusively salt marsh. That's the problem with the state's proposal, is it's almost entirely salt marsh. We want a balanced ecosystem. We don't want a monoculture. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Name? Come on.
Leslie Purcell, I'd like to donate to Margot Griswold. She's
Okay,
a
what was your
scientist.
name?
Leslie Purcell.
Okay. So 2 minutes for Margot.
Hello, Margot Griswold, restoration ecologist. I actually did the analysis for McGuire Thomas on whether they could have that riparian corridor. So I know something about Ballona. I also know something about restoration. And I also favor a more balanced approach than just the three alternatives that have been presented for the EIR consideration. I'd like to look more at freshwater. And I join with others, such as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in looking for opportunities to create a larger contiguous area of habitat for wildlife, rather than the current proposed alternative that increased flood protection in the form of these massive constructed berms to protect existing roadways and utilities in their current location. Why are we doing that? We're encouraging the long-term fragmentation of Ballona. Let's bring it together. Let's look at a real resilience to sea level rise, lift up on a causeway culvert, and connect the wetlands. And that's what I would like to look at, a real alternative, and we haven't seen that. And I'm also president of Los Angeles Audubon Society, and our comments on the EIR have been presented by our lawyer.
Thank you very much. Name?
Hello, thank you for letting me talk. I'm Marilyn Fuss of Los Angeles, and I'm ceding my time to Marc Saltzberg.
Okay. I got you here. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Marc Saltzberg. You have before you a resolution from the LA County Democratic Party. This resolution was put together and is opposed to the proposed restoration. The reasons stated for opposing it are stated in the resolution. All I wanted to say about it was that this resolution was really carefully considered. It had over 100 hours of research done. They had a hearing that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife testified at. After hearing all of that, they went ahead and voted to oppose the wetlands proposal. The other thing I wanted to say was about sea level rise. And the interesting thing about this project is that it proposes to remove levees that surround Ballona Creek. If those levees are left in place and sea level goes up, the sea level rise is actually contained within the levees. If you tear the levees down, that's what allows the salt water to intrude into the rest of the wetlands. The crazy thing about this is that because they want to remove the levees, the entire project will be underwater by their own projections in 2100. So it's approximately 200 million by the time they start. That's going to be just gone. All that's going to be left is going to be new berms that they have to build in place of the levees that they remove to protect structures. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Your name, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Fletcher-Hoppe. I live in Marina del Rey. And I'm a member of the Protect Playa Now coalition of neighbors who are wanting to protect Playa and the wetlands. I live 1 mile from the wetlands. There are serious scientific differences. Let's not ignore them. Let's not put our head in the sand and just go forward with a pre-decided idea. Clearly, there are serious differences. Clearly, please listen to them. We are told they need restoration, the wetlands. If this is so, we must apply the Hippocratic Oath to the Ballona Wetlands Restoration Project. In healing someone, the doctor must first and foremost do no harm. This bulldozing project is supposedly to help the Ballona wetlands heal, but there has been no clear evidence. There's no hydrology study.
Thank you, ma'am. Time's up. Next.
My name is Jonathan Coffin. I'm a I love Ballona wetlands. I visit it all the time, and my love for the Ballona wetlands brings me in there with my camera all the time to document what's there. One of the things you wouldn't have known about had I not photographed the drains being submerged completely with water, and then the water the next day going down into the culvert, down to the Ballona Creek, and then for the next weeks, spouts of water coming out from into the weep holes from the soils for weeks. And this was the loss of water for 2 rain events. Finally, they capped it, which was a great thing, finally, but they should remove the drains. And this is another thing. These are Lisbell's vireo. It's an endangered bird. It's occupying both sides of Ballona Creek, Area A and Area B, not the freshwater marsh. The second year in a row, they're occupying the laurel sumac that grows there. There's also mule fat and other native plants that they are documented as using anyway. So that's the importance of the place. It's intact there today.
Thank you.
Open our eyes.
Next. Come on.
Good late afternoon.
Yes.
Thank you very much for letting me address you. My name is Patricia Unise, and I'm here representing the Pacific Ocean Management, the owners of Fisherman's Village. I come today to pose a question to you. When two state agencies collide in a matter that significantly affects coastal access, how do you respond? How should you respond? Recent actions by Fish and Game have collided head-on with the mandates of the California Coastal Act. Fish and Game, at the urging of certain community members, have forced the eviction of the Fisherman's Village employees from the parking lot located in Area A, directly across from Fisherman's Village. These employees occupy just 53 spaces, 1/3 of the available area. Not evicted are the Los Angeles County employees. They continue to park in the lot. After just a few weeks, the negative impact on public access has been dramatic.
Thank you.
People are being turned away.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Knight. I've been volunteering for 26 years now to save this precious last wetland. I used to be a social worker protecting children, and I switched to protecting wildlife and plants because they're becoming so rare. Recently, there was a report by United Nations on the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity Ecosystem Services that said 1 million species are threatened with extinction. And the loss is due to humans, with species loss now occurring to tens to hundreds of times faster than it has in the past. The key reason is loss of habitat. The report found that more than 500,000 species on land have insufficient habitat for long-term survival and could disappear within decades without habitat restoration. Another study has shown that 85% of wetlands in the world have been destroyed, and over 95% of California's wetlands have been destroyed. Please help us save the original natural wetlands left in California was
Thank
a
you.
slow, natural restoration that respects all the species out there, not
Thank you.
bulldozing. Thank you.
Name, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Richard Harmel. I'm speaking on behalf of a freshwater Ballona, and I speak for Sierra Club Los Angeles Chapter Airport Marina Executive Committee. I would like you to overlay your analysis of this discussion we're having with two things. The pro restoration is hammering away at the deteriorating, declining, impaired wetland system. I propose to you that the reason for that condition that's been happening over the past 20 years is due to the conscientious and intentional diversion, dewatering, and discharging of fresh water from the Ballona wetlands into either sanitary sewers or into the Ballona Creek. Number two, their second linchpin argument is that the dredging from the marina was intentionally left on Area A in order to
No,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, finish your sentence.
in order to fill the Ballona. They have one photograph, and their interpretation is that that's why that was happening.
Okay.
In fact, what was happening is that the dredgings were left to dry out and be placed elsewhere to increase the beach 450 feet out, as well as
Thank you.
to fill the moles, to build all the residences there. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
additional time.
Thank you. And obviously, this matter is going to come before us fairly soon? Well, Jack, when do you think we'll be hearing this as a...
It's probably not going to be in the near future.
No,
It's,
not too soon?
No. It's,
Because, and obviously, all of these issues that they bring up about freshwater, saltwater, all of that stuff is being examined.
That's right. This
We're
was
not
just to
ignoring
help
it.
you all understand
Okay,
the
so
context
please,
of what's
you
going
all
on.
will come back, I know, when this is in front of us, but I really appreciate your energy and your interest, and thank you all.